All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain by Dr. Faith G. Harper. Um, I don't know about you, but that title really caught my eye. It's definitely provocative.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to unfuck their brain, right?
Exactly. And what I really appreciate is that this book goes beyond just telling us to think positive. Dr. Harper really digs into the science behind how our brains work and especially how they respond to stress. And to help us kind of break down some of these concepts, we have our expert guide here. One of the things that really hooked me was how she talks about the amygdala.
Oh, yeah, the amygdala.
That's the part of our brain that's responsible for, that fight or flight response.
It's like our inner lizard brain, that primal part of us that's always on the lookout for danger.
So it's like when you're stuck in traffic and you start feeling your heart race and your palms get sweaty, your amygdala is basically freaking out like you're about to be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is that Dr. Harper points out how our modern stressors, like, work deadlines or social media, or even just like the constant barrage of information, these things can trigger that same primal fear response, even though they're not actually life-threatening.
So our brains are basically stuck in overdrive. But what I found really hopeful is that she emphasizes this idea of neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah. Neuroplasticity is huge.
So, like this amazing ability of our brains to change and adapt even as adults.
So it's not like we're stuck with these hardwired responses forever.
We can actually retrain our brains to react differently.
And one of the tools that Dr. Harper really champions for this is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Yeah, CBT. I've heard a lot about that.
It's not about denying our feelings or trying to force ourselves to be happy all the time. It's more about recognizing those negative thought patterns that we all have and then consciously choosing to challenge them.
So instead of spiraling into, I'm a total failure after a setback, CBT helps us reframe it as, okay, this didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from this? What's one positive step I can take forward?
Exactly. It's about shifting from a victim mindset to one of empowerment, realizing that we have the ability to shape our thoughts and, in turn, our emotional responses.
Another concept that really stood out to me was this idea of triggers. Those specific things that set off those intense emotional reactions?
Yeah, like maybe you had a really critical boss in the past, and now every time your current boss uses a certain tone of voice, you feel your anxiety spike.
Exactly. Dr. Harper encourages us to keep a trigger journal to track these patterns.
It's like becoming a detective of your own mind.
Yeah, and once you have that awareness, you can start to interrupt those automatic responses. She provides a whole arsenal of techniques in the book, like the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like the simple way to bring yourself back to the present moment when you're feeling overwhelmed.
You just name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, and so on.
I actually tried this myself during a particularly stressful meeting the other day. It's amazing how quickly it shifted my focus away from those racing thoughts and back to my body and the physical world around me.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system by engaging your senses.
Exactly. And that's what I love about Dr. Harper's approach. She doesn't just throw out these concepts, she gives you practical tools that you can actually use in your everyday life.
And she provides so many options, from grounding exercises to breathing techniques to visualization practices. There's really something for everyone.
Speaking of visualization, there's one technique that I have to ask you about, the fuck it bucket.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I'll admit the name made me chuckle at first, but the concept is actually brilliant.
It's definitely attention-grabbing, but essentially it's about visualizing this bucket where you dump all your worries, anxieties, things you can't control.
It's like acknowledging that you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and consciously choosing to release what you can't change.
It's a way to reclaim your mental space and direct your energy towards things that are within your control.
I love that. It's such a powerful reminder that sometimes the healthiest choice is to simply let go.
And that's where self-compassion comes in.
Yeah.
Which is another key theme that Dr. Harper emphasizes throughout the book.
Yeah, we tend to be our own harshest critics.
But Unfuck Your Brain encourages us to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we'd offer a good friend.
It's about silencing that inner critic and replacing it with a voice of support and encouragement.
And she doesn't just tell us to be kind to ourselves. She provides tangible strategies for cultivating self-compassion, like practicing gratitude or reframing negative self-talk.
One of the things that really resonated with me was how she linked self-compassion to setting healthy boundaries.
Oh yeah, boundaries are crucial.
It's about recognizing our own needs and limits and having the courage to communicate them assertively, even if it means saying no sometimes.
which could be especially challenging for those of us who tend to people please or fall into that fawn response.
Exactly. But she provides practical tips for setting boundaries without guilt, emphasizing that it's not selfish, it's an act of self-preservation.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we can't pour from an empty cup. We need to prioritize our own well-being if we want to show up fully for ourselves and others.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, from understanding the brain's stress response to the power of neuroplasticity, to the importance of self-compassion and boundaries. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
There's so much more to uncover in Unfuck Your Brain. Dr. Harper provides a wealth of practical strategies for managing stress, regulating emotions, and building a more fulfilling life.
And we'll be diving into those in more depth in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
Yeah. So we're back, and, we're diving deep into Dr. Faith Harper's Unfuck Your Brain. And one of the things that I found really interesting in this book is how much she talks about mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah, mindfulness, it seems like that's like the buzzword these days.
It is. It's everywhere.
But what I appreciated about Dr. Harper's approach is that she really connects it back to the science.
Like how it actually affects our brains.
Exactly. Like she talks about how mindfulness can help strengthen our prefrontal cortex, which is that part of our brain responsible for, rational thinking and decision making.
Right. Because when we're stressed out and that amygdala, our lizard brain takes over. It's like our prefrontal cortex goes offline.
We're not thinking clearly, we're just reacting.
Exactly. And that's where mindfulness comes in. It's like training our brains to hit the pause button before we react.
To create that space between the trigger and our response.
Yes. And in that space, that's where our prefrontal cortex can come back online and help us make more thoughtful choices.
And what I love is that Dr. Harper doesn't just tell us to, be more mindful. She gives us actual techniques to practice.
Oh, yeah. She has a ton of great exercises in the book.
Like one that I've been trying out is box breathing.
Oh, box breathing. That's a classic.
Have you ever tried that?
Oh, yeah. All the time. It's so simple, but so effective.
Yeah, you just breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4.
It's like a mini meditation you can do anywhere.
I do it in traffic before presentations, even in line at the grocery store.
It really helps to calm the nervous system.
Yeah, it's amazing how just a few rounds of box breathing can totally shift my energy.
It's all about tapping into that mind-body connection.
Yeah.
And recognizing that our breath is such a powerful tool.
And speaking of the mind-body connection, Dr. Harper also talks a lot about the importance of physical activity.
Oh, yeah. Movement is huge.
She's a big advocate for exercise as a way to manage stress and boost mood.
And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like, she's not saying you have to go run a marathon or anything.
Just find something you enjoy, whether it's dancing, hiking, walking, swimming.
Whatever gets you moving.
And make it a regular part of your routine.
It's all about taking care of yourself.
Which brings us to another big theme in the book. Self-care.
Yeah, Dr. Harper really emphasizes that self-care is not selfish.
It's an act of self-preservation.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup.
And she breaks it down into the basics, sleep, nutrition, hydration.
And making time for things that bring you joy.
And a huge part of self-care is setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah. Boundaries are so important.
Especially for those of us who tend to people-pleaser or fall into that fawn response.
It can be tough, but it's so crucial for protecting our energy and well-being.
What I appreciate about Dr. Harper's advice is that she encourages us to start small.
You don't have to, overhaul your entire life overnight.
Maybe it's just saying no to one extra commitment, or carving out 30 minutes a day for yourself to do something you enjoy.
It's about recognizing that you deserve to have your needs met.
And that includes protecting your time, energy, and emotional space.
So we've talked about mindfulness, physical activity, self-care, boundaries.
These are all really important pieces of the puzzle.
But Dr. Harper also provides a lot of specific exercises for managing those challenging emotions.
Like one that I found interesting was the worry time technique.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever tried that?
I actually have. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it really works.
Yeah. Instead of trying to push away those worries that pop up throughout the day, you actually schedule a specific time to worry.
Like 15, 20 minutes each day.
Sit down with a notebook and just let those worries flow.
It's like giving your worries their own designated space.
No, they don't take over your whole day.
And what's amazing is that by giving them that dedicated time, they often lose their power.
It's like you're acknowledging them, giving them their due, and then moving on.
Another technique that I've been using is the S-stop-E method.
Stop.
It stands for stop, take a breath, observe, proceed.
It's such a simple acronym, but it's so helpful.
It's like a little reminder to pause before you react.
to create that space for a more conscious choice.
Because it's so easy to get swept away by those intense emotions.
But we always have a choice.
We can choose to react in the same old patterns. Or we can choose a different path.
And that's what Unfuck Your Brain is all about, empowering us to make conscious choices that support our well-being.
It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize.
And that even if we've been struggling for a long time, it's never too late to start making changes.
Dr. Harper's book is such a great reminder that our brains are incredibly adaptable.
Even as adults, we can learn new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
And we can create a life that is more aligned with our values. A life that brings us more joy, peace, and fulfillment.
One of the things that I find so inspiring about this book is its emphasis on neuroplasticity, this idea that our brains are constantly changing and adapting.
And that we can actually rewire those neural pathways.
To create more positive and fulfilling experiences.
It's a message of hope and empowerment.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're not stuck with our current thought patterns or behaviors.
We have the ability to change and grow.
And that's a message I think we all need to hear, especially in a world that can feel so overwhelming and stressful sometimes.
Dr. Harper's book is like a breath of fresh air, offering practical, evidence-based strategies that can really make a difference.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles.
And that there are tools and techniques out there that can help us feel better.
And it's a reminder that we have the power to create a life we love.
A life that feels good in our minds and bodies.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's explore how we can take all of this wisdom and actually turn it into action.
What are some of the key takeaways from Unfuck Your Brain that can help us make real and lasting change in our own lives?
Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing tools and techniques, but I think the big question for a lot of people is like, where do I even start? You know, it can feel really overwhelming. You read a book like Unfuck Your Brain and you're like, yes, I want to do all the things. But then it's like, okay, but how do I actually make these changes stick?
And I think Dr. Harper does a really good job of addressing that. Like, she emphasizes this idea of starting small.
Yeah, don't try to do everything at once.
You don't have to become a meditation guru or, like, completely overhaul your diet overnight.
Just pick one or two things that resonate with you and start there.
Maybe it's 5 minutes of box breathing every morning. Or maybe it's setting aside 15 minutes each night for a worry time.
Whatever feels doable for you.
And then just be consistent.
Yeah, consistency is key.
It's about building those new habits over time.
And I think it's also really important to celebrate those small wins.
Yeah, like don't get discouraged if you miss a day or if you don't see results immediately.
Just acknowledge the progress you're making.
Even if it's just a tiny step in the right direction.
And I think that leads us to another really important point from the book, which is this idea of embracing imperfection.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Dr. Harper really hammers this home.
Like, we're all human. We're going to mess up.
We're going to have setbacks.
We're going to make mistakes.
It's inevitable.
But the problem is that we often hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards.
And then we beat ourselves up when we inevitably fall short.
And that just creates more stress and anxiety.
It's a vicious cycle.
So Dr. Harper encourages us to let go of that all-or-nothing thinking.
And embrace a more compassionate and realistic approach.
Like, it's okay to not be perfect.
In fact, it's impossible to be perfect.
And it's also important to practice self-forgiveness.
Oh, yeah, that's so huge.
We tend to hold on to so much guilt and shame from past mistakes.
But all that does is keep us stuck in the past.
Dr. Harper reminds us that we were doing the best we could at the time.
With the knowledge and resources we had available.
And that holding on to those negative emotions just doesn't serve us.
It's time to let that stuff go.
And one of the ways we can start to let go of that guilt and shame is by seeking support.
Yeah, sometimes we need a little extra help.
And there's absolutely no shame in that.
Dr. Harper actually talks a lot about the importance of therapy.
Yeah, therapy can be such a valuable resource.
It's a safe and supportive space to process your emotions, to work through challenges, and to develop new coping skills.
And there are so many different types of therapy available these days.
There's something for everyone.
So if you're feeling stuck or if you're struggling, please don't hesitate to reach out for help.
You don't have to go through this alone.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain, is there one final takeaway that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. I think for me, it goes back to that quote that we mentioned earlier. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them.
Oh, that's such a powerful reminder.
It really highlights that we have a choice. We can choose how we respond to our thoughts and emotions.
We don't have to be controlled by them.
We can observe them without judgment. We can allow them to pass through us. And then we can choose to focus our attention on something more positive and empowering.
So I guess the message is unfuck your brain and create a life you love.
Yes, a life that feels good in your mind and body.
That's it for this deep dive into Unfuck Your Brain. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you learned some valuable tools and techniques. If you're interested in learning more, we highly recommend checking out Dr. Faith G. Harper's book. And until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep taking care of yourselves.